Hello, America. Big Lou here. Coming to you from sunny Scottsdale, Arizona on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. Now, we are practicing self distancing, social distancing. We've talked about that in the past. We're also hunkered down here, avoiding as many public uh, events as we can. What I want to talk about today is having the opportunity to exercise what's given to me by our United States Constitution, the right of free speech. Now, having been born in the 50s and growing up in the 60s, I understand what exercising your right to free speech really is. And let me tell you, a couple of times I got whacked pretty good for exercising that right. A few times by my mother. I think a wooden spoon was involved. But plenty of times by my father, either the back of his hand across my mouth or with an open hand in the back of the head. Most of those discussions centered around me being much too liberal. In fact, most of the discussions that I had with my father centered around my liberal desire to have long hair. In fact, on one occasion, he sent me back to the barber shop 4 times in one day because my hair wasn't cut short enough. On the 4th time, the barber cut my ear, and that was it. I didn't have to go back after that. Which brings up an interesting point. As I said, being a product of the 60s, our political beliefs, I guess, as young people, where we were considered more on the liberal side. Now, we were against racism, hands down. I mean, I grew up. I was a young kid during the race riots in the early '60s. In fact, as I probably mentioned before, my dad was in the dairy business, had to get the milk out no matter what. Well, there were curfews and so on during the race riots in our town. We had to bring the milk into the hood. And I recall one time where we pulled up to a restaurant. My dad said, "Here, you wait in the truck." He went in, he grabbed a can of milk that he would put in the milk dispenser, ran into the restaurant, and there were people all over the place. They were milling outside. They weren't protesting. They had rocks, they had bottles, and so on and so forth. I rolled the window up in the truck. I was frightened. I was a young kid. Well, anyway, my father gets in the truck. After he was done, he says, "What are you doing? Roll the window down." I go, "Well, Dad, look out there. You see what they're doing? I mean, I was afraid somebody was going to throw a rock at me." He says, "Just roll the window down." I go, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, if they throw a rock, they'll break the window." I go, "If they throw a rock and the window's not up, they're going to break my head." He says, "Just lean down. Get low. Get low. Get below the window." Anyway, that's the way my father treated things. We were also against the Vietnam War. That was a topic of discussion at every Sunday dinner table. There were, you know, all of my uncles who all served in the World War II would defend our right to defend our country, and we'd have arguments. The kids would have arguments with the adults. At the end of the day, we were sent out of the room, and that was the end of that too. So here I am, some 50 years later, and I don't feel like my political thoughts have changed much over the years. Still against racism. I think it's silly. It's stupid. We we were colorblind in our family when I grew up. Everybody came and ate at your table. So we're we're still against that. We're definitely against regime change wars. We don't want to be responsible for going in and telling other countries how they have to rule their people, especially at our expense. And just like back in the 60s, I'm all for limited government. We don't want government telling us what to do. And quite frankly, pretty much the same as what I felt back in the 60s, I'm all for decriminalization of marijuana today, even today. Back in the 60s, we didn't want to legalize it either because it put half our buddies out of business. So, I mean, my position hasn't changed at all. We just don't feel that it's a criminal thing. Now, what we didn't have to think about was we didn't have to think about things like immigration because immigration was something that this country was founded on. There was a way to do it. Had relatives that waited at Ellis Island for months. Many of them turned back because they had eye infections. But we knew what had to happen. So we had no political opinion about immigration back then. Universal health care, we didn't have any opinion about universal health care. What we did was we tried to live healthy. I mean, back in the day, even though you hear all the stories about, well, we drank out of the garden hose, we rubbed dirt on it when we got a cut, and all the rest of it, it's not true. We did everything that we could to live a healthy lifestyle. That deteriorated over time because we looked for more convenient ways to live our life. And the one thing that I know that I really haven't changed my mind about is that today I don't think that we are more entitled to anything than we were back in the 50s and 60s. We didn't feel like anybody owed us anything. And I still don't feel like anybody owes us anything. You work for what you get, and you get what you work for. So, when I hear about all the ways that people have in terms of communicating and telling people how to live their lives, it's distasteful to me. And so, what I would like to suggest to everyone is respect other people's opinion. Everybody's entitled to one. And allow them to speak their piece. And once you've had an opportunity to hear it, you can decide whether or not you agree or disagree. That's your right. End of the lesson.